Hey y'all, good day. Today's project, changing out the rear brake pads on our KX250F project. This is going to be very similar to all the Japanese models. So if you're getting ready to change out your rear brake pads, stay tuned. As you can see here, the rear brake pads are getting very low. We definitely want to change these out before we start going metal to metal. Otherwise, you'd have to replace your rotors as well. First step, I'll take the bracket off. That's just a protection bracket. Now, the manufacturers make this fairly easy to replace these pads in the field. So first thing we want to do is prep this caliper for installing the new brake pads. There should be a cover holding your brake pad pin. If you remove that, there'll be a hex key. Next, we're going to have to push this piston back in. So what we want to do is crack our bleeder so we don't force any contaminated fluid back up the line into the master cylinder. At this point here, I'll take the rear master cylinder cover off as well. The reason I'm doing this is because since I'm in here doing the rear brakes, I am going to flush the system out, get all the old fluid out, and get some fresh .4 in there. Now at this point here, you may be able to push your caliper in and it will push your piston back in. However, there may be some cases where these guide pins are frozen from lack of maintenance. No grease, these boots get torn, water gets in there, they corrode, and then they don't move. This is something you're absolutely going to have to fix because this caliper has to be able to slide back and forth. So ours are good, and once you get a little bit of space, you could go in here with a screwdriver between the pad and the piston and go ahead and push your piston back in. If this is very, very dirty, corroded, you're going to pull this caliper off and rebuild it. This one looks like it's in really good shape, so we'll go ahead and push that piston back in. You certainly wouldn't want to push the piston back in if it's full of any kind of mud or grime that could potentially damage the seals. Now, as you can see, our caliper moves freely on the pins. Next, we'll take out this support or retainer pin. And there's your brake pads. Now it's as simple as just installing new brake pads. Replacing your pin, and then we bleed the brakes and you're good to go. I'm going to assume that this caliper is damaged, or the slides are not working, or just for my peace of mind, I'm going to go ahead and pull the caliper off, lubricate all of these slides, clean everything up so I don't have any trouble in the future. This here is basically if you have to swap them out in the field quick. But to do the job correctly, we're going to remove the caliper. Now, some of these may require a little bit more effort to get off of here. The Kawasaki is not too bad. First thing we're going to do is take our line off. One thing to keep in mind is brake fluid is hydrophilic. It attracts water. It also is water soluble, and it'll also eat paint. So if your rims are painted, you definitely want to be very careful about not getting any brake fluid on it. If you do, just wash it off really quick. That is some thick goop, and it does not slide well. So we're going to wash and clean all that. Next, if we don't want to take our bracket off altogether, the caliper will not slide off past the rotor. So we have to loosen this bolt from the bracket. So now if you were having problems with these slides being stuck, you would have to take this entire bracket off, which means taking off the wheel, pulling out the axle, and sliding this out of the way. With your rotor out of the way, then you'd have a little bit more access to move this around. Now that we got our caliper on the bench, the fluid coming out of this thing is filthy, and that's why we go ahead and flush it out. But you can work these pins out if they're stuck in there. A lot of times, like I said, these boots will get torn, water will get in there, and they rust. So if you have that problem, get a caliper rebuild kit. We're going to clean these pins up. We're going to clean this out real good. Now, I don't have a kit for this caliper, so I will not be rebuilding it, but I'm going to show you. We're going to go ahead and take the piston out of it. So retighten up your bleeder. Now, this is sort of dangerous. Be very careful, because we're going to put some air pressure in this hole, which will force this piston out, and this piston will come out pretty hard and fast. If you got your fingers in here, you're looking for trouble. What I normally do is put a wrench or a paint stick or something. Just keep your fingers out of the way, and the easiest way to do this is with a little bit of air pressure. Now, your kit will usually come with a couple of the pins, and if you look down inside of here, there's a square cut O-ring. That's your piston seal, and then towards the top there's a dust seal. You fish those out and put new ones in. Clean your caliper up real well, clean your piston up real well. You can use like quadruple zero steel wool or something along those lines, a little brake clean and a rag. I'm going to use my Dremel tool with a Scotch-Brite pad. After you get your caliper and all your pins, everything cleaned up, I did mine in the parts washer, but you can use a toothbrush and some brake parts cleaner. You're ready to reinstall this. Obviously put your new seals if you're doing a rebuild. Using a .4 brake fluid. A little bit of fresh fluid on the piston and the seals will help slide this back in, and it's just kind of a wiggle and she'll go back in. Now, we definitely want to grease up where the slides go. They do make caliper greases, synthetic or silicone based. If you don't have it, just basic wheel bearing grease or any kind of grease you got is definitely better than nothing. Now, these pins are sealed inside of the rubber, so you can go ahead and lubricate them. We don't really want to put any lubrication on anywhere else because of the fact that dirt will stick to it. But now that your caliper is rebuilt, let's go ahead and get it reinstalled back on the bike. Now, this is basically just going to go on in reverse of how we took it off. Now, as you can see, your caliper slides perfectly. And the reason for this is so that as the pads wear, the caliper can readjust. If these pins are stuck, it'll put more pressure on one of the other pads and could potentially wear one pad more than the other and damage your rotor. Also, if this rotor has any kind of wave to it or wobble or warp as they call it, you can feel that in your pedal if the caliper is kind of stuck and it pushes the piston in and out. This way, if it's wobbling, the caliper can kind of follow along with the rotor and take a little bit of that away from your feeling. Now, it's always recommended to replace these crush washers. You can get a whole assortment of them from Harbor Freight for, I want to say this is like $5 or something like that. And they got tons of them in there, so you can do a bunch of jobs. Now, this whole time, this line is probably going to be draining on your floor or in a bucket, and that's fine. We want to get most of this old fluid out. We'll add new fluid, and we are going to work it through. Now we're back to square one again. We'll go ahead and get our new pads put in. These are sintered metal pads. Now it's time to bleed the brakes. What we want to use is fresh .4 fluid from a sealed container. Brake fluid is hydrophilic. It attracts and mixes with water. And we're going to top off our reservoir. So the quickest way to get the brake fluid to the caliper is going to be open your bleeder, push down on your pedal, and continue to hold it. Close your bleeder, release your brake pedal, open your bleeder again, push down on your brake pedal and hold it. Close your bleeder. If you look at your reservoir when you let go of the pedal, it will draw the fluid in. And we will just continue to do this. Keep an eye on your reservoir level. If it gets low, top it back off. You can see the brake fluid coming out of the bleeder is dirty. That's good. We're forcing all that fresh fluid into the system. We're going to continue to do it until we no longer see any air bubbles. Now that we got the majority of the air out of the system, we're going to push the piston out. And the way we do that is we'll just keep our bleeder closed and we're going to push down on our pedal several times until the piston just makes contact. Now what I like to do just for good measure is I'll pump and hold the pedal a few times and hold pressure on it and then slowly open the bleeder to make sure there's no air that comes out. You always want to make sure you close the bleeder before you let the pedal back up because it'll suck air back in if you don't. After it's all bled, re-top off your brake fluid. You're going to reinstall your reservoir cap. The reservoir cap will push out any excess that it doesn't need. And that's basically it. You've got a successful rear brake change / caliper rebuild and brake bleed. System will be working like new again. At this point here, you want to do a couple of hard stops from a high speed to almost a dead stop a few times. Let them cool in between, and then you're ready to go ride. Appreciate you guys watching. Hopefully this video will help you out if you're getting ready to do some brakes on your bike. It's actually not that difficult. It's pretty simple. Just do the job correct and it'll last you for a long time. Thanks so much for watching. Throw me a thumbs up if you like this video. Appreciate a subscription if you haven't already. Thank you so much, you guys, for all your support, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.